Alrighty, so today we have the Gate Titan, one of the new drop-in MOSFETs that will replace your trigger contacts. We're going to be going over some of the features that it has, as well as some of the differences between it and some of the other comparable units on the market today. So just start off beginning, make sure everyone knows that this particular one and all my experiences were done with a prototype or a beta test version of it. Some of the changes, there were some changes that were made between this and the production run. The one thing that I do know changed was a little bit of with the selector switches, which I can discuss later when we start talking about that. There might be other changes that I don't know about, so please keep that in mind as you're watching the video. Okay, so first things is this unit here is designed to replace your standard trigger contacts in a normal version 2 gearbox. What it replaces is it will remove your cutoff lever, which is normally here, as well as your trigger contacts and your trigger trolley and all the springs associated with that. This particular one, once you change it out, there is no mechanical connection between your trigger and this box or the control unit at all. It is 100% all optical sensors. So the pluses that this offers over your standard contacts are there's no contacts to burn out, so you can run anything up to a 4S LiPo, which would be a 14.8 volt battery, without any arcing, because there's no contacts at all whatsoever, so you don't have to worry about burning those up. You can run 7.4 and 11.1 as well, anything. Pretty much it'll handle pretty much any normal airsoft battery, unless you're really crazy. And some of the other pluses that it also offers is it offers cycle completion, so it will always complete the cycle when you pull the trigger. It knows, it has a sensor, so it knows when the gearbox has cycled all the way. You won't ever have any trigger lockup because there's nothing mechanical there for it to actually lock up. And then as well as the other fun features of having a burst mode, anywhere from a 2 to a 10 round burst, as well as different programmable triggers, selector positions, so that you can have a safe semi, a safe semi-auto, safe semi-burst, safe burst auto, and they even have a special one that does safe, semi-auto, and burst with a normal 3-position selector switch. So on top of all those things, all those added features that it gives you with the firing modes, it also allows you to do pre-cocking. What that pre-cocking will do is it will actually keep your piston pulled back partially at the end of the cycle, so that when you pull the trigger to fire again, it no longer has to pull the piston all the way back and then fire. It's already held back, and so it just releases the piston. It gives you much faster trigger response in semi-auto. In auto, you won't notice it hardly at all, but in semi-auto, it can make a very, very noticeable difference in your trigger response there. On top of that, it also offers the LiPo protection, so you can run a LiPo or an LiFe battery in this. You can tell it what type of battery you're running, and it will warn you when the battery is about to die so that you don't over discharge your battery, which, as you all know, with LiPo can be an issue. So this particular one, when I tested it, it dropped straight into both a JG gearbox or JG/Echo 1 gearbox, and it dropped straight into this one. This particular one is a Lone X gearbox. I did not have any issues dropping it into this whatsoever. It dropped straight in, and I did not have any clearancing issues at all. It went in, bolted in just the way it's supposed to. And just to point out right now, it does come in 2 pieces. I have the top piece off to kind of show you everything inside. Also on this particular one, it removes your safety lever. For some people, they might be worried about that, but when your selector switch is on safe, the trigger will not do anything. You can move the trigger as much as you want, so it'll still move, but it won't respond to any inputs from the trigger, meaning it won't actually fire. So you can, even though it may seem odd to some people who aren't used to that, it's completely safe and you won't have any issues there. On this particular one, note that there is no mechanical interface between the trigger and the MOSFET itself. There are optical sensors on the board, which you can see right here. These 5 little things right there are the optical sensors that read where your trigger position is. So the nice thing about this is you can program where in the trigger pole it actually fires. So if you want it to fire here, you can do that. If you want it to, if you don't want it to actually fire until you get the trigger all the way to here, you can do that as well. It's completely programmable, up to you. There's 5 different positions that you can run. So point out, some people may not like that there's no mechanical switch. Some of the others, such as the BTC or even like the FCUs and the some of the HPA systems, have a mechanical switch that is being pressed when you pull the trigger. This particular one, there is no mechanical switch. So you will not have any feedback that you have reached the firing spot on the trigger other than the gun firing. So on the for the selector plates on this particular one, they also operate off of optical sensors. So to note, when you put your selector plate on, you need to make sure that you have either the shiny metal plate on here, or you might need to add some sort of tape to the back of it. Because they are an optical sensor, they work off of reflections. And if you just have the solid plastic, it might not work and you may not get any response from it. So you may need to add something like the aluminum speed tape or some other very light colored electrical tape for it to work properly. So one thing to note is that if you choose to buy just the Titan unit, that without any of the programming, without the programming card, which looks like this, or the computer programming adapter, you will not be able to change any of the default settings that are already in the board. It does not program via trigger. It only programs via the programming box or card or the computer cable. So one thing to note on this as well is that with this you can view the sensor positions, which is very handy when you're trying to troubleshoot or get it installed properly. And you can also read error codes that it may or may not throw. You're having issues. It can make it a lot easier when you're trying to troubleshoot. Thing in this guy here, what it does is it plugs in with a micro USB here and just straight into your laptop or any type of computer you want to run it to, and you can run it here into the programming card so that you can update the firmware on the programming card via this adapter, or you can also program it. You can also program the Titan itself via a laptop or computer through the cable. And note that some of the programming options are not available through the card and are only available through the computer cable. I know one of them that's only available through that is the sniper delay. So you can put in like a time delay in between each shot. You can only do that via programming through the cable, as far as I know at this time. They may change that in the future. I don't know. And also you can do the update. You can also update the firmware in the Titan itself via the cable. So the number one competitor to this on the market or that this is trying to compete with on the market, is hands down going to be the BTC Spectre. Now there are a few others such as the G&G, the ETU, and maybe the ASCU Gen 4. But right now I'm just going to talk about the Spectre and this, because those are the two most popular and by far the most well known. So some of the differences and the similarities between the two are both of the Spectre and the Titan are 100% inside the gearbox, unlike some of the others that have a module outside of the gearbox. This is entirely inside the gearbox. The only thing on the outside are the wires to your battery and to your motor. Also, both of them come completely pre-wired. Very easy to install. You remove all your old stuff, put the new one in, make sure it's all good to go. Some of the differences there are whereas this one uses optical sensors for the selector positions, your trigger, and for the sector gear sensor, the BTC Spectre uses a mechanical switch for all three things. Not that one or the other is better than the other one, just something to note that they are different. Some of the other things between the two is they both offer rate of fire control, they both offer burst controls, they both offer pre-cocking. They do offer a lot of the same programming features, and the main thing programming wise between them is that the BTC programs via trigger pulls only, whereas this does not do it through trigger pulls and only goes through the cable or through programming card. So now we're going to plug in the programming card. And I'll set it so that we can view the sensor positions. So, right now, you can see up here in this corner, that is your sector gear sensor. So right now it is sensing that there's nothing between the sensors. Place my finger there, place a screwdriver there, you can see that it changes. So that can tell you that that's working, that part of it is working properly. The other part that you can do is when you're moving the trigger. You'll see this particular light here is turned on, meaning that right now it is activating the very first trigger sensor. As I pull the trigger, it will slowly illuminate 2, then 3, then 4, then 5 lights. When it hits 3, it will light up all the lights below it. The reason for that is that right now it's in the default programming mode, so when it hits the third position is when the gun would actually fire. So as you can see, I'm slowly pulling the trigger. There's the second light. There we go. Second light, third light, and all of them below. So one of the things that I really liked about using this is that if you choose to, you can set the trigger to be extremely sensitive. For someone like me who runs semi-auto pretty much 100% of the time, I really enjoyed being able to set the sensitivity of it to have it extremely sensitive and to set pre-cocking on. So that way it gives me extremely fast trigger response, and having the sensitivity allowed me to really get a fairly high rate of fire, even though it was semi-automatic fire modes. So now we'll roll this over so that we can see the selector switches. I'll have to cover the actual sensors up with my hand because external light will throw them off. So you notice that these 3 up here, are moving as I move the selector gear back and forth. That's showing me that the selector positions are working properly. And that's all of the sensors that you can read via this. You can also read the same sensors via the programming cable when hooked up to a laptop. It gives you a nice readout on the laptop, so you can see, basically it gives you the same information except it's actually labeled. Alright, so here we are, got the gearbox all set back up in the lower so we can actually test it. Right now, we've got the tactical programming card plugged in. Plugs into the battery plug just like any other battery would. Then you take the other plug your battery into that. You'll see it lights up. And so you can go through your different programming. This right here, these buttons here will change the selection in each category, and then this here will switch to the next category. There are 2 pages to this card. What that means is you'll see some of these are labeled in white and some of them are labeled in black. Right now we are on A, which is the black, so we're changing the lights are corresponding to the black categories. We cycle all the way through this page, switches over to page B, which would be the white categories, as you can see there. So now right there it's saying that the precocking boost would be on low if we had precocking turned on. So one of the cool things, as I showed earlier, is the ability to view the sensor inputs via the programming card. So to get there, you hold down the next button. It takes you to it right now. So demonstrate a little bit so you can see the different trigger sensitivities. So you can see the selector switch moving there as I move the selector switch, and down here you will see the trigger sensitivity move up and down as I pull the trigger. It starts to pull it, and there we go. And that'll kind of give you an idea of how sensitive the trigger can be made to be. So you can have it set up to fire there, 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 or there. And in most or other setups, you'd also be able to use the first light. In this particular setup, the trigger is already tripping the first sensor, so that would not work for actually using it to fire the gun. So to get out of that, you just hit the next button again. So right now, we're set on completely default mode. Starts out no precocking, starts out 3-round burst if you choose to have a burst set, but the burst count is at 3. The trigger sensitivity is set in the middle. The battery protection is set to off. Low battery warning is off, and the selector positions are set to safe, semi, and auto. Like I said before, you can change it between multiple different settings if you were to choose. So for this one, we're going to go ahead, just to show it off, we're going to turn on precocking mode to auto. We're going to set the burst count to 2, move trigger sensitivity to position 2, battery protection to LiPo. We'll leave the low battery warning off. It's just kind of my personal preference. And I'll set the fire selector mode to safe, semi, and burst. We'll hit that, go to the next page, and for this one I'm going to turn it to precocking boost to mid. You may need to experiment with your particular setup, how you want to do it, with how much boost you want. For mine, I'm going to be running a 11-1. So right now I don't have a whole lot with this experience with this exact setup, and I might be able to go high, but for right now I'm going to choose to just go ahead and go with mid. I'm going to leave the burst mode to full. What that means is if you leave it on full, it will complete the burst no matter when you let go of the trigger. Meaning, if you have a 10-round burst, you squeeze the trigger and let it off, it will fire all 10 rounds regardless of when you let the trigger off. If you set it to trigger, it will stop the burst when you release the trigger. I'm leaving it on full because I'm running a 2-round burst. With this particular setup, there's no way that I could release the trigger feasibly and have it stop in between the two rounds. And we're going to leave rate of fire control at 100% because who really wants to slow it down? We'll move the battery cell to auto so that it will automatically detect what kind of battery we're using. Excuse me, I should say how many cells of the battery that we're using. And we'll leave rate of fire stabilization off. So that's it. Don't need to save anything. It automatically programs it as you're doing it. So all you need to do now is unplug the battery, unplug the card from the gun, and then we'll use a different battery to plug the gun into. Now, one thing to point out is when you have your battery protection on, it just beeped 3 times. What that's telling me is that it sensed that it is connected to a 3-cell LiPo, which it is. It's an 11-1. And to point out, the very first 10 shots of every time you change settings or change a battery, change anything else on it, the first 10 shots may be different than what it will be in the long term, or it may cycle differently because it's trying to learn how your setup is working. So right now it's got precocking turned on. It may take a few shots for it to actually get it to learn where it needs to hold it so it doesn't overfire or underfire. So you can kind of hear there the first 3 or 4 shots, you could hear it winding up and then firing. And the last couple there, you could hear that it was pulled back already. And so you were getting the precocking effect. So with the sensitivity how I have it right now, you can see how easy it would be to get a very, very nice, crisp trigger response and high rate of fire. All just using the semi-auto. And then this one right now, just got it set on 2-round burst. So you can see it works fairly well. Nice, very short trigger pull allows you to get your if you're a burst fire guy, you can get your bursts out very, very quickly. Alrighty, if you guys have any questions or comments or anything, leave them down below. I'll try to do what we can to try to help you answer them. And also, if you really like the videos, you may choose to click the subscribe button if you like to see more videos like this. And I'd just like to say also thank you to Gate for allowing me to be able to be a beta tester for this and allowing me that experience. And hope you guys have a great day.